Yeah. So what is the Unitarian Christian Alliance, and what's its purpose?
Okay, thanks. Sorry. So its mission's twofold. The first is to connect like-minded Unitarians, because very often we're scattered, we're on our own, kind of like my story.
Yeah.
And so to that mission, there's an online directory. People can go for free to the website. They can register. I did this, and it puts a dot on your zip code that there's a Unitarian there, or you're in a Unitarian church. You can register your church or your home fellowship or whatever you've got going. And then people can go on and look, and they can find you, or you can find them, and you can use the messaging tool within it to reach out to somebody and say, hey, what do you guys think? What are you doing? And try and find some fellowship. And then the second mission is just to promote Unitarian theology to the rest of the Christian world. And to that, actually, there's quite a bit of things that we're trying to do. There's a publishing wing of the UCA that's working on publishing Unitarian works. There's the little social media committee where we're trying to use social media to get the word out. And there's some other things that we have going, including this, what I think is really important, this conference where Unitarians can get together. Like there are a lot of really good Unitarian content creators out there. Lots of great blogs. I love this, for what it's worth. Now I'm going to plug you. I love the channel. I love the people that you've had on. I really enjoy it. And I think it's really valuable. And there's a lot of that out there. And so one of the things that I'd like to see happen from the conference is content creators and others can come together and network to make ourselves even more effective, and encourage others that would like to have a voice to get out there and to enable that. So, I mean, in some sense, we'd like to take over the Christian world with Unitarianism.
Don't tell them that. Don't tell them that.
Well, I got to tell you right now, if I could get William Lane Craig to come out and denounce us, that would be great. I would take it, and some more. There's just a shocking lack of awareness. I mean, even a guy like me that grew up basically in a somewhat Unitarian world, I didn't have the word for it. I didn't have the mental map.
I honestly didn't know the word biblical Unitarian until a couple of years ago. And then when I heard it, I probably searched it on Wikipedia. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. That's what I believe. But I just, growing up, we didn't believe, we weren't Trinitarians.
Right.
We didn't think Jesus was God.
Yeah.
And that was, but we didn't have a theological label, or I was unaware really that anyone unrelated to the group that I had kind of come from had a similar idea. So
likewise. And there was something, I mean, some of that I think was just honest. I mean, I'm reminded, my mother, I think, won't mind me saying this, but like, Mom, how did you guys not know about this wider world of there's all this scholarship about, the first and second century, and there's all this stuff about, the fourth century councils. Like, how is this not just an obvious part of the teaching? She's like, Brandon, you gotta remember, this is before the internet. What we had for information were like magazines and correspondence courses, and there was just limited information for a lot of people. And particularly for, my folks were former Southern Baptists that, not a long list of highly educated folks in my line, a lot of Southeast Missouri cotton pickers. And so, I think maybe we're just coming to a point in history where the access to information is changing things. And, a guy like me that you and I can go to Wikipedia and say, oh yeah, that's it. And then we can go to YouTube and we can find dozens of videos from people talking about it from all different sides. And we can, make up our minds. That's a special and unique thing that just has not existed in history until now. So I'm excited to see what happens from it. And the UCA is trying to position itself to help with that. And it's not a church, it's not a denomination.
Right. This is important
to help it. Yeah. This isn't a church. There's lots of people that are going to be in the UCA alongside you if you join, that you're going to have serious theological disagreements with, that you might not even join in communion with. But look, we do this all the time with other topics, right? With, for people that are concerned about the doctrine of eternal conscious torment. There are plenty of groups pushing back on that. And if you're a pro-lifer, you join arms with all kinds of people in that. And, the NRA folks in the NRA don't all agree on everything else, right?
Right.
Not that the UCA is a Unitarian NRA, but maybe that's a poor analogy. But we do this all the time, and we can walk and chew bubblegum. We can kind of have our circles of association where we have our fellowships where we're together regularly, and we have these wider circles where we share common interests and we work together. So the
UCA is a wider circle than a church or even a denomination. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's something bigger than that. It's like a shared theological advocacy group or something like that.
I love that term. It's almost like a think tank too. I like to think of it that way, because hopefully the UCA is going to bring together some of the best Unitarian thinkers and give them the platform and the tools and the resources to have a much wider impact than otherwise they would have. And that was my big excitement. I mean, I very much like the idea of guys like me being able to find like-minded people, but I'd rather see, the Southern Baptist Convention someday in an uproar because there's a Unitarian subsect.
Well, they are definitely already in an uproar.
Right.
That part.
Right. But for this, I don't want to see the Methodists break up over gay marriage or female pastorship or something like that. I want them struggling with this question. I want all of Christianity to have the opportunity to evaluate this for themselves the way that we have, to know that it's on the table. And it reminds me a little bit of the divine foreknowledge and sovereignty arguments, between Calvinists, Arminians, and Molinists and open theists. Open theism is genuinely on the table now. It's one of the live options that people get to look at. And wherever you come down, I think that's really important to have all the live options on the table and be able to evaluate it for yourself. I think we have that responsibility as seekers, as seekers of God, to make sure that we're not stuck in a hole and we don't know it. I was talking to
sort of force ourselves into the Overton window of Christological conversation in the broader, Protestant Christian community.
Yes, absolutely. Yep, absolutely. That's my dream for the UCA, along with connecting lots and lots of people, is to see that change, and just out there that want to describe how terrible Unitarianism is. I'd like for them to use their entire platform to say that. And so that's why, you see Unitarians taking debates and going out to these audiences, because, you don't need to win everybody. You need to make people aware so they can decide for themselves. And in a lot of Christianity, it's not on the table yet. So hopefully we can make some progress on that.
I think we would both agree that the numbers of people that are sitting in the pews of plain old Trinitarian churches throughout the country and throughout the world, who either have confusion or perhaps some private conviction that they don't quite know the words for, that aren't Trinitarian, is way, way bigger than people are aware of. And it's just that they're often isolated in their own heads, and they might know that this is one of those subjects that they shouldn't speak their mind on.
Absolutely. We get messages from people like that all the time. I got a message on YouTube today on one of our videos with a guy saying, "I'm so glad to know I'm not the only one that has concerns about this." And he wasn't saying that he was a Unitarian, but he's like, "I just have concerns about the Trinity." And so he responded to one of the 3 blunders in church history video that led to the Trinity. And he said, "This is so helpful. Thank you." And look, this guy's not a Unitarian yet necessarily, or this gal. But at least now the conversation's open for him. And if he decides that based on his best exegesis and historical research that the tradition's right, then that's him doing his due diligence, and he's got to follow his conscience. But at least we've done our job in presenting the case, and hopefully we'll do a better job of presenting in the future. I mean, to your point about the supposed monopoly of Trinitarianism on Christians, look, we know from surveys, the last Legionnaire Ministries survey showed 50% of respondents didn't consider the Holy Spirit a person. So I mean, they're either confused, or there's half of the Christians out there that were surveyed aren't Trinitarians,
right? And some absurd percentage thought that Jesus was the first creature created by God.
Yeah.
And then some other super shockingly high percentage thought that Jesus was not God.
Yes.
And like you could even filter to like within Catholicism or within evangelicalism, and it's like, all right, within evangelicalism, and shows up to church at least once a month. And I'll be shooting from the hip. Maybe I'll put a link to that too, because it was fascinating. But it was something like 20% or something.
It was between 20 and 30% of people that basically held a Socinian Christology.
In evangelical churches that are almost certainly Trinitarian on their statement of faith. And so that's like a couple million people, right? In the United States alone.
Yeah, it's a huge number of people that said, yes, I'm a Trinitarian. No, Jesus is not God. So look, I think there's massive confusion. And look, Trinitarian apologists know this. I heard a quote from James White a while back, who said he thought maybe 5% of people in the pews had a non-heretical Trinity doctrine in their heads. And I think he's right. Partially because I don't know how you have other than just doing what he does, which is say some words, but don't define all your terms.
Right.
As soon as you start explicating it, I'm just convinced you either end up in tritheism or modalism, collapsing the Father and the Son, one or the other. Although
you just say what you're not enough times.
That's right.
Like you say, I'm not on that side of this buoy, and I'm not on this side of this buoy.
Right.
But then the question, okay, so where exactly are you in between?
Well, let me refer you back to my statement of faith and my creed, and good luck. The number of options that are on the table are growing, and thanks in part to Dale Tuggie's work. So if you check out his article in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, it used to have basically three main categories: one self-Trinitarians, three self-Trinitarians, and Mysterians. Well, he's gone and updated it with some more categories. Four self-Trinitarians, who define,
which I actually think is way more common than people realize. I think
it's Chad McIntosh, right?
Yeah.
Who I think has been on the channel. I believe I heard him interviewed.
I mean, I think James White at the end of the day is a four self-Trinitarian. The being of, like, he makes this that super strong being person distinction. Right. I would talk about the being of God as himself, and you can talk about the three persons as himself. So it's like, so the Trinity is the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit and God. right. Yeah. And it's really, it's a quaternity, but there's like two shelves, right? On the top shelf is the God being, and then on the bottom shelf is the three persons, but they're all selves. And
we shouldn't forget William Lane Craig's view, where you have these like functions that are the three persons, and there's just it's on and on. And my favorite right now, and I can't remember his name at the moment, he was just on the Trinities podcast a few months back, and I apologize to him, but who argues for true contradictions, that in some cases you can have logical contradictions that are true, and all the rest of us go, ow, right?
Right.
But within the Trinity world, this is accepted. And, it's kind of astonishing. I'm surprised there's not more serious struggle and pushback between each of these camps on each other. And the only way I can explain that is they're united against the common enemy of non-Trinitarianism.
Right. And for the record, that's Dr. J.C. Beale.
Thank you, Dr.
Was
Beale.
the guest who argued for that the incarnation basically is a true contradiction.
Yeah. Many Christians try to do their best to toe the line and understand the tradition, but they're not all church historians, and they're not all, seminary trained theologians. And those that are, that's where you start seeing the fight, because they know there's a fight to be had. So, So yeah, like I said, circling back to the purpose of the UCA, this conversation we're having, whether we're right or not, I think needs to happen within Christianity. The same way the discussion about God's, foreknowledge, pushing back on Calvinism needs to happen within the Protestant tradition. The same way pushback on eternal conscious torment needs to happen, in my view, and other elements of the tradition. I very much relate to the restorationist identity of either the Stone Campbell movement, or I like pointing people to Sean Finnegan's Restorationist Manifesto. I didn't have a term for what I was until I listened to that. I'm like, oh yeah, that's me. Restorationism. I like that. And I could look back at generations of my family, and I'm like, that's what they were all doing. As Protestants, they were trying to continue the Reformation. They were trying to gather the information they had, and that's how they ended up in a cult. Is because they knew that that where they were wasn't right. That didn't fit with their Bible, and so they kept looking. And you know, in my own family's history, I'm proud of a lot of it. There's some of it where I'm like, guys, I'd like to go back and have 10 minutes with my grandfather to say, hey, let's talk about some of this stuff. But look, I like to have see that conversation happen with those of us that are alive today, and give people a chance to evaluate the options.
Right.